Welcome back, Beans Army, to another episode of the Less is More Sports podcast, the college offseason podcast, where you could say we're for the fans, by the fans. Matt, how you like that intro?
I like that. Oh my God, we're making progress here. I can actually get behind this. This
You
is
know, it's funny
beautiful.
it's funny you say that because I still like the other one because I feel like it's more marketable, but you like this one, and you know what? I'm going to turn it over to you to tell the audience what we're doing, and while you're doing that, I'm going to run a poll on the X Twitter/X page, whatever you want to call it now, and see what
Um,
the fans think. So, I'm going to turn it over to you. Let the fans know what we're doing today.
all right. So if you watched last week's episode or have been paying attention at all, you know that the college football season successfully came to an end on the 20th of January in the year of our Lord 2025 with the Battle of the Midwest ancient powerhouses, and now that's done. And the season takes too long now, and we need to fix that. But the good news is, as we head into February and eventually into that beloved month we call March, we're getting into the peak season of college basketball, the sport that Curtis Blow loves more than anything else on earth. But, college football is a very daunting gauntlet, and it can daunt a lot of people. I'm using the word daunted a lot. That's kind of like a dog whistle for IU fans. Uh, so if you haven't been paying attention to the college basketball season, or maybe you just watched a few games around Thanksgiving because it's on during your turkey coma, well, this is your chance to catch up on some of the fun stuff and not so fun stuff, or just the interesting and wild stuff that's been going on across college basketball while you've been paying attention to whatever bowl game you've been watching, whether it be the Pop Tarts Bowl, the Mayo Bowl, or even, God forbid, the upcoming Ketchup Bowl. That's actually not coming, but I wish it was. So, and Les and I have come up with 5 topics apiece, one for each of us, 5 for each of us, of some of our favorite of the weird, wild, and what to expect coming forward in the world of college basketball, both men's and a little bit of women's, because everything's interesting and we like to talk about it. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over back to Les. He's going to give me his first topic, and then I'm going to rant a lot today, and it's going to be fun. And you're going to find out how to fill out your March Madness bracket on February 1st and look really, really smart or stupid. I don't know. Your mileage may vary. So, Les, take it away, bud. What's your first big question storyline oddity of the college basketball season?
Before I get started, I do want to point out that I'm glad you're able to have fun on this podcast because I know that IU Purdue game last night was not very fun towards the end. So I'm glad that I'm able
We'll
to
get
help
to
you
that.
somewhat. Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. But my first topic, actually, I'm going to pause real quick because before I get into my list, as most of the viewers who have been tuned in for a while probably could have expected, a lot of my topics are going to be around recruiting. If you follow the podcast for any length of period, you know that I am the self-proclaimed recruiting expert on the show. So it's only fitting that these topics of, in case you missed it, are going to be majority dominated by recruiting. So without further ado, my first one is we have a list trim that I'm going to get into. 2026 five-star center Olivia, I'm going to, sorry if I butcher this last name, Vuksosa, I believe, or Vukosa, actually, I think it's Vukosa, is cutting her list to 7 schools. She's the number one ranked center in the class of 2026, and she's currently deciding between 16 schools. She has now announced that in the coming weeks, she is going to trim her list to 7. Why do I care about this, you might ask? Because one of the teams that I'm hoping makes the final cut is my Texas Longhorns. And if she is able to commit to Texas, by the time she arrives on campus, she could team up with some of the other McDonald's All-Americans that we've been able to recruit the last couple years. And in particularly, it will still be the senior season of Longhorn legend, and you heard it here first, Madison Booker. So I would love to see the Twin Towers of, I'm going to try and pronounce this again, Vukosa and Booker. That concludes my first one.
At least you didn't you said Olivia, and my mind autofilled to Rodrigo, so you're doing better than me at least. So you got that going for you. Well, let's hit on my first topic kind of already a little bit, which is that if you haven't been paying attention earlier last year, oh my God, it was last year already. During our preseason preview show for college basketball, I said that Indiana had the most talented roster in the Big Ten on paper. And well, sometimes paper is just that because it's been the weirdest season I can remember for Indiana basketball. And that includes last season and the season before that and every other year under Mike Woodson, it feels like. Which brings us to the inevitable conclusion of what's going to happen to Indiana basketball down the stretch. Because it used to be, this whole debacle really started with a huge, insanely debilitating, insanely debilitating loss at home to Illinois, where Illinois scores 97 points and wins by about 30. Then they seemingly right the ship a little bit with a huge win at Ohio State in overtime. And now the narrative has shifted yet again after a loss to Northwestern on the road, a loss to Maryland at home, and a loss to Purdue at Purdue, which was a lot closer of a game than many people thought. But the problem is with Indiana basketball is it's just a mess. Not only have you proven that you can get blown out by anybody on any given day, your execution when you have the lead, especially in that Maryland game and a little bit last night, where you have late leads, has completely fallen off the rails. And that does fall on the coaching staff because let me tell you, in those two games, they played hard, and a lot of the pickiness of the fan base was focused on the players. But the last two games, the Maryland game and the Purdue game, it has proven beyond a doubt that the issue is most likely the coaching. And for a situation that, and I'm sorry, Louisville fans, I'm glad you're having a great year and all that stuff, that has never reached the lows that Kenny Payne did at Louisville. It feels 12 times more toxic than the Kenny Payne era U of L ever did online. Because with Kenny Payne, it was just this air of aloofness, this we're just bad. This is a team that could achieve a lot that has bad coaching and can't execute very well when it comes down to the most clutch moments of a ball game. And that is why we're entering this very strange period. And I'm avoiding a couple topics because Les is going to talk about one of them, and I don't want to steal his thunder. We're approaching a very weird narrative where people are committing to Indiana, but it's almost like they know the coach won't be there because now in these days where you can secure the bag, take care of your chickens, if you're getting paid, you either, it doesn't really matter, I guess, the situation you're going into, you just know. But Indiana basketball is a mess, and they're entering a very tough stretch with a coach who's kind of flailing down the stretch. And it's interesting because it's more interesting than some failures because it's just, was this always going to happen? Is this just what happens when you give a guy his first year, 3 years of Trace Jackson Davis? Or is this just or is this a sign of what's happening with coaches where alumni hires due to play in the NBA just don't kind of click with what's going on in college basketball? But Indiana basketball is a fascinating train wreck right now. As much as I hate to say it, I'm kind of interested to see how this ends because they're going to steal a few games. There's too much talent to just completely collapse and lose every game from this point out. They're going to steal a couple. But unless, like, barring some kind of Elite Eight, Final Four, Ryan Day miracle run, Indiana is going to be looking for a new coach in about 50 days. But in between that, we're going to have a very interesting ride because Indiana social media, players are getting into Twitter beefs with media personalities, with fans. It's just going to be a very interesting ride. And I hate the fact that instead of we're talking about the most talented team on paper coming to fruition, we're talking about like the very end of an era after 4 years that's going to be more fun to watch as a train wreck than any kind of competent basketball game.
Before I get into my next topic, I do have an idea that could potentially save Mike Woodson's tenure at Indiana. I know what you just said and everything that you gave us there, like Indiana fans probably don't want that at this point, but I do have an idea that could potentially save the Mike Woodson era at IU. But believe
Mm-hmm.
me, before I say it, I don't want this to happen at all. But I think if Indiana could find a way to bring Coach Jay Lucas on the staff, I think that could save his tenure. Because what I've noticed through the Indiana Mike Woodson era is that he's got no problem coaching bigs. I mean, whether it's Trace
No,
Jackson Davis, whether it's
none at all.
Kalel Ware, whether it's Omar Balu, but the guards have been the weak spot. If you can bring in somebody like a coach like Jay Lucas, who not only is a great recruiting coach, he's a great guard developer on top of that. I feel like that could save the Woodson era in a lot of ways.
I don't. I think that the as good of an idea as that is, I think the vitriol and the distrust is just too high to recover.
Sure, sure.
I think that especially after that weird senior day last season with the true fan statement, things just got so toxic, I guess is the best way to put it, really, that there's no salvaging it. If Indiana was, I don't know, 18-3 at this point, we're not having this discussion, but when you got that much money and that much money and talent on a team and you can't get it done, especially when you have two games seemingly in hand and you've already alienated part of the fan base, I think the wound is so deep that you're going to have to amputate,
No,
unfortunately.
that's a very fair point. I'm just saying that was I was just brainstorming, you know.
Yeah, that's a good brainstorm. You never know who the next head coach is going to be.
Right, absolutely. Anyways, I'll get into my second topic, and one of the bigger recruiting stories that happened this week is that five-star for the class of 2025, Elijah Arenas, who a lot of you all know is the son of former NBA player Agent Zero Gilbert Arenas himself, has committed to USC. But that's not the big topic I want to talk about. We are seeing a trend the last couple years with some of the recruiting that's going on with USC basketball. First, it started with Bronny James, son of LeBron James, and now we got Elijah Arenas, son of Gilbert Arenas. What is it with these Nepo babies going to USC? Is it just Hollywood or, that Hollywood lifestyle or the bright lights or what? But it seems like USC is really benefiting these last couple years from getting the sons of these NBA players. And I don't think that's necessarily the worst model right now because if you're following the recruiting scene, there's a lot of former NBA players that have sons currently in the recruiting cycles. So if they're able to land a couple of these, they could potentially build a pipeline to where they could bring in, the talent of some of these former good NBA players. And that also brings up the next question because I've heard this on social media a lot. Is Elijah Arenas the best son of the former NBA player with this crop of players, at least? My answer, of course, is no, because it's like Cam Boozer doesn't exist or anything. But, anyways, back to the original point, this is a trend I think that could last as well because USC's not just doing this with Eric Musselman. They did it with Andy Andy Einfield too. Did I pronounce that name right?
Enfield.
Einfield? Andy Einfield, yes. But they're doing it with their last two coaches. So if USC can establish a trend, they could actually develop a pretty marketable pipeline for bringing in talented players for years to come.
Yeah, it's been a weird season for USC so far. They've just really underperformed to this point, but there's always help coming. And I mean, it for a guy like Eric Musselman, whose whole thing is young guys and transfers. Some seasons are just like that. I mean, that last season, even people forget that season where Arkansas went on that very deep run was not a great season for Arkansas. We kind of were like, oh, well, Arkansas is going to make the tournament because they've got enough talent, but they're not going to do much. And then they make a run to the Elite Eight or whatnot. So I think that's just the Musselman way. It's some seasons when you live by the transfer and the young player, it's just how you die too. So next season, ride or die season for them. I think they can pull it off. And I mean, we know now. Not only, and you got to adjust to that Big Ten schedule. We can't forget that. And once you do that, you're going to probably be in good shape with a guy like Eric Musselman. But
Before you continue, I do have one quick question, and I know we didn't prepare for this off the camera, but when you said if you live by the transfer portal, you have to die by the transfer portal, and what correlation or similarity do you think it's similar or different to living or dying by the one and dones?
that's a good question. I think it's a little different because even with the transfer portal, theoretically, like what good teams are doing is going and getting guys who have played before. Maybe they played in a smaller league. Maybe they were a sixth man on a very good upper division one team. But theoretically, with those guys, you're getting guys who know what the hell they're doing. So in a way, it's even harder because you're getting guys from, let's say I go out and I get a guy from Marist, and I get a guy from North Florida, and then I get a guy who played for Tennessee that just didn't work out. You're bringing in three different guys from totally different cultures, totally different systems, totally different coaching styles who have been coached differently. They're all ballers. And sometimes that works out and you get a Pat Kelsey at Louisville or a Mark Pope at Kentucky. And even they've had moments where like you can see like the chemistry is still not coming. Or you can get a USC or you get an IU where the talent is there and it shows and you win games, but it's just not, clicking. Whereas with Kentucky, yeah, they were always talented when they had one and dones. But John Calipari's not there anymore for one reason and one reason only, and that's those young guys. When you put them under the spotlight, it can get a little hot, and then you end up giving up a bunch of points to Jack Golke or St. Peter's or somebody. So I think it's more challenging almost to build with but they're in your system. And I think it's also more challenging to build with guys from the portal, especially if you add a bunch, because you're in culture, you're encapsulating so many cultures, and then trying to put them in yours as a coach, as like a GM, as anything. And when it works, it can be a beautiful thing because those guys all buy in, and you're winning games, and they're veterans, and they know the grind, they know how they function, they know how to study, they know how to avoid the pitfalls better than a young guy. But if it doesn't work, you just have like this idiosyncratic offense and defense, and guys not helping each other, guys getting pissed off over playing time, and it can fall apart very quickly.
Fair enough. Now I think it's time for you to get into your was it this your second or third topic?
This is my second, yeah. So don't get me too far ahead. Indiana may be a mess in terms of being a program, but there's a conference out there that's just such a mess right now, but it's a beautiful mess, and that's the Atlantic 10 Conference. If you were paying attention, back around Thanksgiving, maybe watch a couple tournament games, you would think that Dayton, with the way they played in the Maui Invitational, was going to just run away with this conference, and Malachi Smith was player of the year, and yada yada. Here come the Dayton Flyers into the tournament. And Dayton is currently sitting in fourth place in the A10 with some inexplicable losses in conference play. And now the rankings shape up as George Mason is first overall in the conference at 7-1. VCU is in second at 6-2. Josh Schertz, hey, remember him from Indiana State last year? St. Louis in third and Dayton in fourth. And St. Louis just beat VCU at VCU, or just beat VCU as their fans brawled in the stands with fans of St. Louis. So that's always fun. But this conference, if any of those four teams get in, whether it be Mason, VCU, St. Louis, or Dayton, they're going to be a tough out when it comes to March because these guys are no slouches. George Mason, especially. They've got Darius Maddox. He's a great guard. He's averaging 13.8 points a game. They've got the Jalen Hayes, a big 6'8 forward senior. He averages 12.2. Those guys are dangerous. VCU, even without Mike Rhodes, is still doing VCU things. Joe Basimile is averaging 16.5 points per game. They still play that suffocating defense. Of course, we all know what Dayton can do because, well, they're Dayton. They usually have a good season. They've got great players. They've beaten some pretty impressive teams and should have beaten more if they could hold on to a lead in Maui. And then, of course, you've got St. Louis, who everyone forgot about Larry Nerd. But he's still there, baby. He was hurt to start the season, and he's back now. Robbie Avila, he's still there. Any of those four teams get out of that mess, whichever one of those four, which means like I'm discounting Duquesne or St. Bonaventure, and they're going to come through and win or something, and I'm going to have to eat my words. But if any of those four teams get in and they're like the 12 seed in your bracket, you need to be aware if you're that 5 seed because those guys are really freaking good. I mean, and if anything, having a conference like this where it's a one bid league most likely, even with all these crazy upsets that have been happening in league play, you're going to get a battle tested team that's got some ballers on it, and it's going to be fascinating to see. So the Atlantic 10 is a mess, and whether it's George Mason, Virginia Commonwealth, St. Louis, or Dayton, the team that comes out of that scrum come March is going to be very dangerous because these guys they all have superstar players, really good coaching, and if those guys can put it all together, they'll be battle tested from conference play. So watch out for the A10, my second rant of the day.
Just so we for time constraints, so we can get through all these topics, I'm going to get into my third one, and that's to touch on something that Matt's Hoosiers just did here recently. IU lands 2025 Bosnian wing Harun Zerno. And as good of a player as I think Indiana's getting in this, that's not the bigger story here. What we're noticing is that in recent years, European basketball players are dominating the NBA, whether you see that with Luka Doncic, whether you see that with Nikola Jokic, and so on and so on. Throw Giannis in there, he's from Greece. But we're starting to see more and more European players start to come to college basketball, and I think is ultimately good for the game. Whether it's Igor Dimin at BYU, whether it's the kid from Illinois, um,
I disagree. I hate Kaspers Yakinchonas.
well, you
Worst
can
player
hate
ever. I
you can
hate him.
hate him. You can hate him all you want, but I mean, I still think this is good for the game because European players bring a very fundamental style of basketball. And I think that's just in an era where, the NBA is losing ratings and all that stuff and it's a lot of drive and dish, shoot some, and shoot the three and all that stuff. I think European players can help aid the ratings and to bring basketball, more entertaining for the average fan again because of the fundamental style that they play at. So that is my number 3 topic.
I'm kidding mostly about Kaspers Yakinchonas. I mean, I hate the guy because I'm an IU fan. He dropped like how many points on us when he played? But let me
I'm
tell you something. Illinois is a good team. He's a dangerous player. They're going to be fun to watch. And you
And
know
not to
who else?
mention him and Cooper Flag match up on February 22nd.
Which is still weird that there's a non-conference game, but I'm
Right.
excited about it. I'll
Facts.
take it. I'll take it any day of the week. You know who else is in Illinois, college-wise? Les, the Bradley Braves of the Missouri Valley Conference, and this is another one where it's not as intense as the Atlantic 10 is. It's clearly a two-horse race there. I mean, Belmont, University of Illinois, Chicago, University of Northern Iowa, they've all had great seasons. But I mean, Bradley and Drake are both 9-2 in conference. Those guys are on a collision course for the Arch Madness Championship, and even if Bradley beats Drake, Drake deserves to be in the NCAA tournament because they are just an amazing team. After their coach leaves Northwestern Missouri State, comes in with all these guys, comes from the Division II level, and brings in the most electrifying young guard. Well, not young, most electrifying guard I think I saw play back in November in Bennett Sturts, who came from Northwestern Missouri State. That kid is absolutely amazing. He brought half the roster there, including he brought Mitch Muscarian. He brought most of his guys in, and like he's doing what Deion Sanders wants to do at Colorado with these guys. Because I mean, Drake has beat Kansas State. They've beaten a lot of good teams out there. And even if they lose to Bradley, I think they deserve to be in. Bradley, of course, still has Duke Dean. They still have Zeke or Zach Montgomery. They're a very good team. They have a lot of shooting, a lot of size, not a lot of size, but a lot of great offense. So that two-horse race between Bradley and Drake, this is just phenomenal. These two teams are both phenomenal. And if I was king of the world, which probably should happen, they would both be in March Madness because they're just two amazing teams. And I think that whoever gets them in that bracket, in the draw, they're going to be in for a really rough game because these guys are just that good. Drake, so my third big one, I guess, or is this four? I don't know.
Who
Whatever
needs to
take
count?
whatever take this is, the two horse race in the Missouri Valley Conference is by far the most intriguing non Power Five race that we've got going on right now, and either one of those teams is going to. I wouldn't be surprised if either one of those teams made a deep run when March came. So Missouri Valley two horse race. That's my take.
For my number 4, this is a get to know this name now type of take. Because if you are a recruiting fan, get to know the name Dylan Betts. He is a 7'2 freshman who is quickly rising his stock as a prospect. He plays for Cherry Creek in Colorado, and he's been on a tear his last 5 games, averaging almost 12 points a game, almost 9 rebounds. But the key stat here is the 4.2 blocks a game. He had in his last 5 games, he's also had 5 blocks apiece, and he's had 5 straight games with double-digit scoring contests, meaning that he's had more than 10 uh, each game, and not just blocking the shot, but making it difficult for the shooter. But not to mention, that might not even be one of the most intriguing aspects about his game. Basketball is a family business in the Betts family. His sister Lauren is a star center on this UCLA team and is expected to be a high draft pick in the 2026 WNBA draft. His sister Sienna is a McDonald's All-American this summer. She's a burger girl, currently playing for Sierra Canyon High School. His dad, Andrew, was a 7-1 center for Long Beach State and drafted in the NBA in 1998. So if you are a recruiting fan, get to know the name Dylan Betts now because he could be one of the best rim protectors or rim protecting prospects we get in the coming years.
You know who he's probably, unless he goes to Duke or North Carolina, he's probably not going to end up in the ACC though. And it's funny we talked about building through the transfer portal a little bit earlier because if it wasn't for the existence of the team on your hat right now, the number one seed in the ACC tournament would be those Louisville Cardinals because, and I'm not trying to discount what Pat Kelsey has done or the transfer portals he's brought in. But man, I think even you, as a Duke fan, can admit the ACC down bad this year.
Oh, for sure.
Because this week alone, I thought Louisville had the past two games alone, I thought Louisville may be in some trouble because SMU and Wake Forest are two of those kind of middling teams that could go on a run. They've got enough talent where they could surprise the folks, and Louisville just busted their doors off. And then you look around the rest of the conference, like Pittsburgh is pretty good. Pittsburgh's pretty good. Carolina, man, I mean, they've been a huge, even almost as bad as Indiana when it comes to like the expectations being here and the actual results being here. It's been wild to watch that to the point where Hubert Davis might be smelling a little bit of smoke under his chair if he's not careful. I mean, I've just been amazed with how down the ACC has been. So, of course, it seems like we play this game every year, and like four ACC teams get in, and they all end up in the Elite Eight, just like last year. So, I don't know if there's actually an NC State caliber team this year, to be honest with you. I mean, we saw what happened at Miami. Jim Larrañaga's gone. Everybody who was on that NC State team is pretty much gone into the ether playing overseas now. Duke is Duke. We knew they were going to be good. I mean, we can't even lie about that. When you bring in that much transfer portal and that much young talent, you're just going to be good. Louisville is a pleasant surprise to be that good. North Carolina is a disappointment. Wake Forest is kind of disappointing in the way they've been playing lately. Pitt, Jeff Cable's doing a very good job over there. I mean, it's just been weird to see how off the ACC has been this year. So that's my big fourth is like, what's going on here with the ACC? Leonard Hamilton's got NIL like deals that have gone sour on him, players threatening to protest. I mean, it's just been a wild year in the ACC with all that expansion. Really, whereas it helped them in football, it's kind of hurting them in basketball. So it giveth and it taketh away. So Duke, Louisville, you're the only two locks right now as far as I can tell. So enjoy. Because, I mean, the ACC being down bad, that's my fourth take about the college basketball season this far.
As impressive as Louisville's win streak is, it is worth noting that a lot of games during this win streak, they are playing teams almost immediately after Duke plays them. And as a Duke fan,
I have noticed that.
Yes, and as a Duke fan, fellow Duke fans know exactly what I'm about to say here. The Duke effect is real. And what I mean by that is when you have these teams, Duke is a big brand on their schedule. And when you get up to play them, and then you put everything you have into playing them, your next game you often struggle. Louisville is benefiting from teams giving everything they have to try and beat Duke. And this Duke team is so talented that as good as Wake Forest and NC State played against them, it wasn't enough. But now with Louisville getting to play a lot of those teams after Duke plays, they are benefiting from a lot of these teams getting their heart broken by a very talented Duke team. But anyways, for time constraints, I need to get into my number 5. And ironically enough, as I've spent majority of this podcast talking about the recruiting world, I am going to switch it up for the last take that I have and take it to the transfer portal. Inspired by one of my side quest videos and where I talked about the Tennessee chant sheet being leaked and trash talking gone wrong, it honestly begs a really interesting question. What is the best way to build through the portal? Because with Tennessee and specifically, the last 2 years, they've gotten their best player from the portal. And there have been other teams that have built through the portal very differently, and it's worked out for them. So it really begs the question, what is the best way to build through the portal? Is it, going out, keeping guys that, keeping a bunch of role players on the roster and going out and getting your star player? Is it, recruiting the foundation of your team and going out and getting, good role player pieces like what Duke's doing? Or, of course, there's the model like Louisville and Kentucky we've seen where you pretty much have to rebuild your whole roster. So, what I want the fans to do is comment what is the best way to build through the portal? And that concludes my number five.
Yeah, it's funny we talk about that too, because it's like I'm thinking about what we're seeing with Kansas City right now, with the Chiefs like trying to three-peat. It's like sometimes the best way to do it is you've got your superstars, you've got the positions where it matters, you got your tight end, but then you go out and you make the moves that are like seemingly innocuous that end up making a difference. Like you sign Joe Tooney, you sign Jawan Taylor, you sign you trade for DeAndre Hopkins. I think that's the best way to build through the portal. If the ideal way, at least, is
Mhm.
you address the needs you see to complete what you've built. Kind of like Purdue last year. You know, their biggest problem was they didn't have a shooter. What do? They go out and they get Lance Jones, and Lance Jones is the difference because they've got the bedrock, and now you're just adding the guy in to fulfill that one specific niche that you didn't have.
Or
And
like
for
what Duke did this year.
yes, with Zion James and all that.
And
You know, it's
oh,
funny.
don't discredit my guy Malik Brown, who I just found out since we've been on this podcast will play in the North Carolina game tonight.
Not good. Oh, you
I
know what
bet.
I'm saying. I'm not trying to discount any. I'm not trying to discount Mason Gillis either. It's just
Absolutely, absolutely.
that's just
Mason
what you
Gillis
think.
has had a very good last several games.
It's just the thing you think of first when the guy
Right.
you think of first always surprised. Of course, I think of the mid-major guy.
Malik
But
Brown is the best defender in college basketball. Don't at me.
remember we said that about Theo John? Wasn't that a great time, was?
I never said he was the best defender in college
He had a
basketball.
good dunk. He had a good dunk. Well, it's funny we talk about that because Purdue, because my fifth one is Danny Hurley goes from the greatest coach of all time to the whiniest coach of all time, it feels, in no time at all. And I mean, this has been a recurring theme throughout the college basketball season from the Maui Invitational, where he says he's not coming back because UConn finally, after having a lot of consistency in the last 3 or 4 years, finally has a little bit of a hiccup, and now the sky is falling to the "I'm the best coach in the country" quip to the official. Yeah, Danny Hurley. I remember like we even on our show like 6 months ago, we were talking about like, oh yeah, Danny Hurley, if he gets this thing together, he's going to join the echelons of the Jay Wrights and the Bob Knights, and he's joining the Bob Knight tier in a way that I don't really know if you want to join the Bob Knight tier, which is he's about 2 games away from throwing a chair at people. So that's been interesting to me. It's like UConn has really done a better job. They play Marquette tonight, and it's a very good litmus test. They've had a rougher season than anything they've had over the past 2 years, and they're probably not going to win the championship. And I know I'm speaking like about things I don't understand, but it just doesn't feel right this year. The stars aren't aligning for UConn like they were last year. But Danny Hurley is still a good coach. UConn is still a good team. It's just really weird to me that like Danny Hurley's gone from like an heir apparent to John Wooden to I'm the greatest coach of all time, damn it. And we're talking about his coaching and his breakdowns and his attitude more than we are talking about like the development of Liam McNeely. It's quite weird to see that, or Alex Caravan trying for a three-peat. It's just really wild to me to see that. So that's my third thing is that, or final thing is that the weird Bobby Hurley downgrade that's happened just since Thanksgiving of this year has been really interesting to see because it just shows how quickly the media and all that will turn on you if you do something that's, and I mean, some of these are egregious. Let's not kid ourselves. Some of that behavior during Maui was pretty egregious. But it's just interesting to see how fast people turn on you for stuff like for stuff like that. Excuse me. Where it used to be praised as like, oh, he's a passionate coach. Oh, he's this, he's that. It just goes to show you that nobody likes you when you're on the top, and that target is that much bigger.
And if only somebody on this podcast said in the preseason that this UConn team looked like it has a bunch of holes. Oh, wait, that was me. So I wanted to throw that out there. But that concludes our top five topics. So what I want to do is let you all know again, like and subscribe to Less is More Sports YouTube and Spotify channels. Be sure to follow the social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Threads. That's at Less is More Sports. Be sure to follow the side quests on TikTok. That's at BeansDad018. And before we go, of course, you know, being a Duke fan, I got to throw this out there. We have another chapter in the greatest rivalry in college basketball. Duke, UNC, 6:30 tonight. And if you couldn't tell by my background, I got the Austin Rivers shot, which Matt believes is a hot take that I think that that shot was the only good thing Austin Rivers did in his freshman season at Duke. But nonetheless, that's not the main point I want to get into. If you take away anything from this podcast, it's get you a friend that looks out for you the way Con Knipple looked out for Tyrese Proctor against NC State. In case you missed it, during a crucial defensive possession for the Blue Devils in that game, Tyrese Proctor gets a loose ball and is about to fall out of bounds, but is quickly saved where Con Knipple comes in for the rescue, grabs Tyrese Proctor's leg to keep him in bounds. Definitely a IQ 200 play. Me personally, I've never seen that before. I didn't even know you could do that. But nonetheless, get you a friend like Con Knipple is all I gotta say. Matt, you said you wanted to say something about that too.
Yeah, so what you're saying is get yourself a friend who does things that are vaguely illegal to help you get ahead in life. That's such a Duke mentality.
That's such a ride or die mentality, depending on your
Uh,
perspective.
yeah, sure. They didn't help that guy, poor Adam Maluka, who threw up on the middle of the court or anything.
Come on, Malowich, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, we have a whole medical team that was attending to him.
You're trying biological warfare on poor old NC State, and then you have to cheat to get there. Unbelievable.
You know, I mean, he should have
Just
just not chugged
unbelievable.
that Gatorade too fast.
You guys are like, it's like heel tactics in Royal Rumble tonight. I mean, I don't even think Duke can top that. You're gonna come out like doing the Styles Clash on on North Carolina. You know, R.J. Davis is gonna get the tombstone.
Accusing us of biological warfare is crazy work, but I'm here for it.
What am I supposed to say to that? You know, you got a guy vomiting on the court. You know, what's it look like to you, Les?
Don't
That game.
chug. Don't. I mean, I think lesson learned. Don't chug the Gatorade too fast.
Sure. That game was wild. You had
That was
like
a wild game.
you had the kid collapsing in the stands. For some reason, we're talking about
Honestly, that's easy to
Rip
do
Kobe
at
Bryant.
Cameron. That is easy to do at Cameron because everybody's so packed into there. It gets hot and it gets hot fast. I've
I'm
been there. I
all
know.
more biological warfare is all I'm hearing. Biological warfare from Duke, baby. Unbelievable.